Welcome, everybody, to Boxing Scene Today inside the ProBox TV studios. Well, it was an interesting weekend of boxing that may define the future in two divisions that are right now red hot. We'll discuss it right here. Jimmy Smith in studio alongside the champs, Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi. So, Tevin Farmer versus William Zepeda. Zepeda getting another decision, but there were cracks, problems with the performance. Did he do what we expected? Chris, when we talked about this fight, you said this is a kind of fight you get behind you. Tevin Farmer is dangerous for his age. He's better than his record. All these things, got an awkward style. If Zepeda gets out with a win, he won, moved past it. Did he do that effectively enough to you?
Yeah, he did exactly what I said was going to happen last show. I thought he was going to win. It was going to be tough again because I think stylistically it would never be a good matchup for Zepeda against a guy like Tevin Farmer. And unless he got old overnight, I think it was going to be a very similar fight to the first fight. Probably won't get dropped this time, and he didn't. But still, Tevin put on a great performance. You know, Zepeda came out fast, just like he did in the first fight, and it looked like he was going to overwhelm Tevin once again. Tevin seemed to have gotten hurt in the fourth or fifth round, hurt his arm, elbow, shoulder, something along those lines. And in those corners, it looked like he didn't really want to be there anymore. Willed himself through, then starts banking rounds and just finds his groove because he's a rhythm fighter. Once he found that rhythm, really started to pour it on late. 12th round almost scores a knockout. Almost gets a knockdown. Is looking to really pull the fight out of the fire. Ends up losing.
That could have been a knockdown.
It could have. I think it was. Yeah.
It was a little bit of a cuffing shot.
Yeah.
Pushed him down a little bit with the.
But yeah, it was a very similar fight to the first fight. We saw some of the glaring flaws that Zepeda has, and listen, man, Tevin Farmer still got it, right?
He still got it. I'm just saying, he still got it.
He still got a little hangover there.
I'll tell you what. For me, another very close fight too. You know, because I thought Zepeda, you know, really a fun fighter and shows why he's a fun fighter. Comes forward, throws a bunch of punches, goes to your body very, very well. I thought he was more devastating to the body than he was to the head. I thought the commentating crew was giving a little too much credit for the head for the attack of Zepeda early on, as far as nothing was landing clean. That's why Farmer was able to withstand it. They were making like Farmer was getting blown away, and like, how is he still standing? Well, he's still standing because he's not getting it clean.
Right.
The body shots, though, were having effect. I thought he got hurt to the body once or twice. The elbow, I still can't figure out exactly what it was. I mean,
I think it was from a punch. I think he got punched in the elbow.
But you know, it never really came back to light, right? Nobody talked about it afterwards in the post-fight. He didn't really give an explanation for it. So it was really weird. That's really weird. I'd love to know what that was about, because as the fight wore on, it was almost like it didn't happen, because then he started getting his bearings. You knew Zepeda could never keep that pace consistently. And once he was slowed down just a little bit, you started seeing Farmer punching between him, started leading a little bit more, landing some good shots. And before you know it, the fight's back competitive again, and it's back up in the air. And now Farmer thinks he also could have been given the decision. But in this case, you know, you're in Cancun. You kind of knew if you're going to go for a rematch in Cancun, it's going to be tough to get the rematch win the rematch there if it's close. And, you know, ultimately, I think the pressure of Zepeda early on probably carry the momentum, and sometimes judges will go with the momentum, and they may be giving rounds that you're not winning anymore, still to you. I think that maybe that could have happened.
Champ, did you notice that it was a 12-rounder and a 10-rounder this time?
Yeah.
And that actually came back to hurt Zepeda
Yeah.
more. It was a 10-rounder.
Yeah, they probably thought the old guy was going to pay for that.
Everyone thought Farmer was going to fade, and he didn't.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He actually finished stronger.
And Farmer put together some nice punches, nice combinations, beautiful punch selection by Farmer.
Snappy,
you know, around the side, up the middle, down straight from underneath. I really love the punch selection. While Zepeda, sometimes, I can tell he's choosing his shots when he goes to the body, because he places his body shots really interestingly and really well. But I think overall, I think he's more of a guy who just looks to punch, and bury you in activity. You know, so I think that ultimately, you know, it's a situation where it's probably you take what you like. One judge has it a draw. The other judges have Zepeda winning. I know Farmer was frustrated because he's not with an A-side promoter, so he can't get these decisions. But I think he keeps himself relevant. I think he keeps himself as a difficult proposition for anybody in the lightweight division. Will they fight him? You know, obviously coming off these losses, I'm not sure.
He's 0-3 at this point in his last 3 fights, but still walk into a big fight.
But looking good. So he may need to go get a small win to come back from, which is kind of unfair because he should have probably been given at least the first Zepeda fight, you know?
All right, here's what I'm curious about, and I want to stick to that. Boxing Scene rescored the first fight, and they said, now, I have not looked at it. I saw it the first time. I haven't looked at it again. They rescored it, and they said, you know what? Looking at it objectively, Zepeda won. We talk about comparison rounds in boxing, right? Where someone does better than they did in the previous rounds, we give them the round. do we do that to fighters who is not fighting like a 10-1 underdog? So we go, oh man, he won those rounds.
Yes.
No, he
I
did
think so.
better than an underdog.
I think,
do we overrate the underdog?
I think there's
sometimes?
a tendency to do that. I think that's human nature.
Perception is reality, guys. And it's really hard to tuck that perception away.
It's also when you've been blowing guys away like Zepeda, really like they really overwhelming guys, and all of a sudden you run into this problem that is Tevin Farmer these 2 fights in a row. Suddenly Zepeda starts looking human, and then you start to think, okay, maybe Farmer is winning. So yeah, listen, both fights were competitive.
Right.
Both fights, I don't know that it's a devastating decision that Zepeda gets both of them, but I thought Farmer could have at least got one of the decisions, and we could have a nice trilogy instead, which would have been fun, right? Instead, boxing's got to shoot itself in the foot. Where do you put Zepeda now? Because he probably loses every single second of every single round against Shakur Stevenson. Now having seen what we've seen and not knowing what we know, but you put him with Tank Davis, I think it's an interesting fight because Farm and this is just hypotheticals because Tank's never going to fight him, but
Lamont.
Lamont is and Tank is what we want to see at this point. That's a deserved rematch. But what I'm saying hypothetically, you get Zepeda, and right now this Gervonta Davis is still a big name. You have conversation points for both sides because now you say, well, Farmer was landing some clean shots. If that's Tank landing those clean shots in between, and Tank has the speed and snap,
and
you might be gone. But then there's the other side. Okay. Zepeda doesn't go away. What if Zepeda doesn't go away? What if Zepeda takes a few of them and doesn't go away and pressures you like Gervonta's never been pressured before?
Like
because
Lamont
this
did.
kind of pressure,
Like
this kind of pressure is even in the Lamont fight. He didn't get this kind of pressure. That you can't take no knees.
The
now,
volume.
Now you can't take no knees. Where are you going? You know what I mean?
But also,
You're getting pushed
Tank
back
is such a slow starter. He has the ability to be overwhelmed by a guy like Zepeda. Isak Cruz. Isak Cruz came right at him. And yes,
dude, Isak Cruz is stuck in cement. Zepeda closes the gap much faster. You're gonna the face is gonna be forced.
You're making my point. You're making my point for me. I'm saying that I'm agreeing with you that the Zepeda fight with Tank is a good fight because of Tank starting so slow. A volume guy has the potential to run you over. I think Tank's physically strong enough not to get run over, but he's gonna get at work.
Is he mentally strong enough to deal with the pressure?
That's the question.
That's the thing.
Well, how real is Zepeda's power?
Because we don't know, but Zepeda, Lamont isn't known as a big puncher. What Tank doesn't like is being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Zepeda will 100% make you uncomfortable.
Sharp punching and heavy punching are different.
And here's the thing, though. Just as much as he could be uncomfortable, it could also be a first-round knockout for Tank because Tank punches you in between, walks you into something. You could be out. I mean, that Tank has that kind of firepower.
That's another thing. If you force Tank to have to fight you off him, he can still crack you with something and put you away.
Or he'll take a knee.
That is the question. When you look at the larger lightweight division, I saw a guy who, my God, he's fun. Zepeda, take my money every time he fights. A lot of fun to watch. Yeah. But the
Farmer too.
Farmer
I'm
too,
not
dude.
On Farmer. I want to see Farmer again.
Yeah,
I don't know again too at this point.
Did you notice in the broadcast about his elbow and I think maybe a clash of heads at one point? He's turning around and talking to Claudia Trejos outside the ring.
No,
he punched me in the elbow, and I'm going, where is your head? Like, I know it was fun, but I'm also, if I'm his corner, I'm like, hey, dude, sit down.
Nah, that's him though. No,
is that just how he is?
That's him in gear.
That's him. That's him. His ability, his awareness. Right. He's got phenomenal awareness around the ring. Floyd Mayweather was like that too. He would talk to the broadcast.
Yeah.
If you're,
but he was winning.
If you're really
winning
good
every round,
and aware, and you know what's going on, it's a different thing. When you're in your zone, man. I used to hear people on the rows. I was able to understand what was going on around me quite well. I remember hearing my opposing coaches what they were saying. Yeah. When you're in that zone, I wouldn't take that as a knock on him. I would just say that his awareness, his situational awareness when he's in the ring was so high.
You ever hear Harold Letterman giving the scores when you're in the ring?
Well, Harold only did one of my fights.
I heard that a couple of times.
Okay, Jim.
And I knew Harold has me winning or Harold has me losing.
I wish I would have heard that in the Amir Khan fight, so I could have yelled at them. Like, what fight are you watching?
What are you watching? But this idea of you can't watch Zepeda without going, like you said, man, Shakur Stevenson, Lamont Roach, Gervonta Davis, those are problems he's going to have with those guys. Because Tevin Farmer, who 37 years old.
No, 34, no?
34.
I'm sorry.
34.
I'm sorry, 34.
I was
175 years old.
I was surprised by that too, because I'm like, oh man, Tevin's really getting up there. And I look at him, I'm like, oh, he's 34. Okay, all right, he's still there.
But he still got it.
He would land these counter uppercuts, and Zepeda's looking at the ceiling
and then follow
briefly,
it up with a nice combination.
But you could tell it was a 3 or 4 punch combination. Like, you got the feeling that somebody like Shakur Stevenson, someone like Lamont Roach, who's more in their physical prime, would go bing, 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 and might put you on the ropes and hurt you.
Not necessarily.
What were your thoughts? Yes or no? What were your thoughts on it?
I mean, not necessarily. I think they're. I don't Tevin was never a puncher at 30, and now we're at 35.
Right.
This is not really his weight class. He's very snappy. And that's what I was saying before. Snapping punches are different than heavy punches. Not a heavy puncher, he's a snappy puncher. So when he gets respect, it's because he's putting it right down a pipe. He cracks you, catches you on the chin.
And also, you got to know you're in and you're out, right? I mean, Zepeda's a very active guy. So when you freeze him with a shot, you can follow it with 2 or 3. If you try to follow with 5 or 6, you're going to be in an exchange because he's going to throw back.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to, unless you really hurt him, which obviously Farmer knew Zepeda wasn't hurt with these shots. He was frozen with those shots. You know, when you're a boxer like Farmer, you know, you look to freeze a guy with a sharp shot, and then off that you look to jump on him for another couple of shots.
And
but
it's
if you,
more so
you
to
extend
steal.
the combination too long,
you're stealing the moment, not hurting
the guy comes back and punches. You know why this problem in his career was Amir Khan? He didn't know how to. He didn't have this exit strategy where. I have time for a 2-3 piece right now based on what I'm seeing, or I have time for, and he extended to a 5 or 6 piece, and in between the 5 or 6 piece, and then between the 5 or 6 piece, you get hit in between and get knocked out. You have to always kind of gauge what's left of your opponent, and with Zepeda, there's always a lot left. Even when he's slowing down, he'll still react because he's got that Mexican warrior in him. He's not just gonna not punch back if you start.
And he punches with you.
If you start teeing off, he punches with you.
Even if the shots aren't hard, you get hit with a shot in the middle of something, it hurts.
You have to have that sort of self-monitoring gauge. Okay, I can do 2-3, or I can extend it to 4-5 now. You know, he's slowing down more. You kind of always have that gauge. So I think Farmer, that's why he was putting the 2-3. And I think somebody like Davis and Shakur would also be doing the same thing. But Davis could feasibly hurt Zepeda with those shots. You know,
one of Davis's best shots is the uppercut.
Yeah,
that rear end uppercut's nasty.
But like I said, the reason that's an interesting one to me is because you either Tank possibly hurts him and stops him, but if he doesn't and Zepeda continues this pressure, how does Tank react to the discomfort? That's why the fight is interesting to me.
When you look at the 12th round, you look for the little cracks or little things that you go, okay, you won, but you really need to clean this up. He did not finish strong in this fight. Once again, against a 35-year-old, that was his 8th loss. He had 7 before that. Yeah. And in round 12, he gets knocked. There was a little bit of a push with the punch. I get why it wasn't a knockdown.
A little bit of a cuffing shot.
A little bit of a cuffing shot, but getting tuned up in round 12 almost got, if Farmer had been a bigger puncher, that fight would have been over.
Could have been, could have been.
So what's your thought if you are Lamont Roach Sr., if you're, hey, we can put this guy away. He does tend to fade. Are you seeing the negatives?
I look at it as it's a volume guy fighting in the 12th round, and he's fighting a guy that he missed a lot of shots. Missing makes you much more tired than landing. And he's used to landing. With Farmer, he's always going to struggle because you're not going to land smoothly and cleanly like like hitting a heavy bag. Boom, boom. You can hit a heavy bag for 12 rounds, no problem. It's when you start missing guys, overextending, overreaching, working harder than you need to. So that 12th round, as a volume guy, he's going to be more tired. And also, he doesn't have a different gear. He can't get on his jab and rest and change the pace. He doesn't have that. He's truly a volume guy. And when you got a guy like Farmer that you're missing, you're just going to be more tired.
So where do you put him in the lightweight division? Fun, but vulnerable. Sometimes that's good. Guys are like, okay, where do you put him?
I don't know, man. I want to see Shakur Stevenson because I think he beats everybody. Only in this sport can you be the best one, to be the best guy, and get put on the shelf because you're too good. This is such a weirdness about this whole sport.
I actually think that fight can happen, like soon.
Zepeda and
I think because
what do they get just cashing out Zepeda? Because I think Zepeda,
that's exactly
maybe you can waste more time and maybe try him against a De Los Santos. But who knows? De Los Santos might even beat him.
But the problem with that is even if you fight a guy lesser than De Los Santos, I think De Los Santos does beat him. But if you fight someone even lesser and he looks ordinary,
but De Los Santos has been inactive.
If he looks ordinary again, his earning potential goes down. So do you cash him out now against Shakur, which
is respectable if he loses?
But
what if he loses every second of the fight, though?
Which he will. But there would be no appetite for that fight because people are going to look at that and be like, well, he just struggled with Tevin Farmer for 22 rounds. He's got nothing for Shakur, but Riyadh will pay for it. They're both fighting in Riyadh, so the cash out's there, and it still makes sense. Sure, it's not going to be a blockbuster in terms of ticket sales or eyes on it, but it'll make money. And so if you want to cash the guy out, and it's a respectable loss, and you're not going to get hurt. Zepeda comes out of that fight, he's the same guy.
I can't believe we're having these conversations. I'm having a conversation that Shakur Stevenson and Edwin De Los Santos are on the outside, not in the circle of trust in the lightweight division. They're not in the circle of trust in the lightweight division because they're too good. Well, what kind of sport am I watching?
Did you see Keyshawn Davis calling out De Los Santos? He said, "I sent the contract. Sign it. You got to fight."
Keyshawn has that oozing youth energy.
Fight everybody.
Still wants to prove his name because he wants to prove that he's what he's hyped up to be. No, I mean it's the energy of youth,
right?
That unfortunately even youth doesn't show us all the time now. Before you used to see this eventually at a certain point, but the youth always wanted to show that. Two youths like my cousin Vinny, two youths. The youths used to show this.
How do you spell that? How do you spell that one?
UTES. Youths. That was my high school in Brooklyn, New York Youths. But anyway, so back to the youths. The youths used to sorry, Your Honor, youths. So but
for those at home, that's a movie reference. My cousin
Vinny, guys. I'm not just
we're
randomly
dating ourselves
talking.
a little bit here.
I'm not just talking out of nowhere.
We go to Bensonhurst sometimes over here on the right. Go ahead.
So what I'm saying is, you have this youth energy that Keyshawn has. He wants all the smoke.
Yeah.
He's one of these guys. That's why he's a fun guy to watch, because he's not just looking to win championships but he's not looking to Instagram it. You know what I'm saying? What I call Instagram is make it look like you're better than what you are, make it look like you're more than what you are. No, Keyshawn is the kind of guy. I am this, and I want to show this. Nobody's calling out De Los Santos. And honestly, the only reason he's not calling out Shakur is because they're such good friends that they would make it weird. He doesn't want to make it weird,
bro. Make it weird.
But how weird is it? That much more weird than fighting Davis versus Davis? How weird is that?
That's cool.
Keyshawn versus Javante
cool.
Davis.
That's a great pill.
Loser loses the Davis name.
All right,
we're not gonna get that fight either, Mike.
Okay, Lamont Roach Jr. should he not get the rematch with Gervonta Davis? Would that be a good fight at 35? Would be Zepeda? Chris?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes?
I think we talked about that on the last show. I think stylistically,
we're talking about off air before.
I think stylistically it matches up great, and we said this last time. Tevin's a more of a lateral movement guy. Roach doesn't move like that. He's going to be in the pocket. He's going to be in their position to catch and shoot and make you miss and make you pay for shots. But Roach is
a 130-pounder, coming to 35. It's a little bit of a physically demanding fight for Roach.
Yes, I think everyone, as Zepeda's a physically demanding guy.
I think for Roach, if you don't get the Davis rematch, which that would be disgraceful if he doesn't get the rematch.
I agree.
I think you make a 130-pound defense before making up your mind about the lightweight division.
Pretty much done. The
Lamont
Roach and they're already talking about June 21st.
Signed, done.
I don't know. I don't know if it's done, but it's getting. I'm pretty sure that fight's.
They Saturday Night Live Jeopardy. They better. They better.
Yeah, dude.
Tank versus Lamont. They better.
I really want to see it. I'm just thinking about the other options.
They better.
Yep. I remember it well. This idea that Lamont Roach, once again, I hope it's Gervonta Davis too, but there's talent in lightweight, but not all of it locks up and matches up the right way. As you're saying,
that's boxing.
For the big, for boxing, period. Yeah. But it's such a stacked division. Kind of where does he go? But another big fight, and you brought this up when we were off air. Reason we're talking about it, it was a great performance. Brian Norman Jr. When he stopped Derek Quavas in 3 to retain his WBO title. Talk about welterweights that might be under the radar. Look good. He had a long time off. Looked good. Dominant performance in 3 rounds.
Yeah, we sometimes, because of Stan Jonas and Ennis being such a top tier 2 guys in the welterweight division, and what the welterweight division used to be, and now we seem to be talking about just Stan Jonas and Ennis. We may forget about Brian Norman. Brian Norman, a point was made on the broadcast that I wasn't aware of. He's the youngest world champion right now. Youngest male world champion. So that shows you a lot of upside. Even if he's not the finished product in your eyes as a world champion, he's still a world champion, and he's the youngest of the world champions. So there's a lot of upside there that can grow. And now it starts to make a little bit more sense. Okay, they believed in themselves, and they didn't want the Ennis fight right away, even for that kind of money. Because I would say, okay, for that kind of money, you've never seen that kind of money, maybe you go for the Ennis fight. But you know what? You're banking on yourself when you're only 24 years old, and you're saying, okay, I'm going to build up my brand. Okay, I don't need that fight right now. Unless you pay me out the wazoo, as we say in Bensonhurst, like you crazy pay, then okay, you take it. But it wasn't that kind of pay for them, and so they went and made this sort of an rudimentary first defense against a guy with a good record, not a big name. He hasn't been around in a year, Norman. So you kind of come back and get your feet wet with this defense, right? So it's a brand building defense. Wasn't so impressed with Quavas' effort, to be honest with you. But again, Norman...
You did what you're supposed to do with that kind of guy.
Yes. And Quavas did what he's supposed to do with representing that kind of guy. Take a couple of clean shots and say, I don't want this anymore.
Yeah. Hurt in that 3rd round, knocked down in the 2nd. He just got crushed in this
guys
fight.
Like
it wasn't even devastating knockdown.
Yeah,
no.
But he didn't argue.
Guys like Quavas, I want to know, buddy, you box your whole life for a shot at the world title. What are you doing, bro? Like, if that's how you go out, you finally get your world title opportunity, and that's how you go out. Buddy, go ship for UPS or something. You know what I mean? You gotta give it more effort than that. You live your whole life when you boxing for that world title opportunity. I didn't like the lack of hunger on Quavas, but he come with a good record. Obviously he built it up nicely. Norman did what he had to do, like you said. And that's why Norman still gets the credit here, because he's been out for a year, young world champion, and he's looking to continue to build. So he does what you have to do with a guy in front of him who looks good doing it, gets the stoppage. And honestly, I think it's smart that he got this win just a couple of weeks before the big Ennis versus Stanionis unification, right? Because now your name is in the conversation of the top welterweights.
We're talking about him right now.
The world world championship belts, and those two guys are going to fight. And who knows if those two guys are going to stay at welter or if they're going to move up after they fight one another. If they move up, you sort of become the guy there, right? You sort of become that main name. If they don't move up, well, you're in a big position to possibly fight the winner, or again, you're young, so you maybe wait another year. We'll see.
I got two things to say about Brian Ormer Jr. and this particular fight.
Please.
There was a lot of question marks about him coming up. You know, he was young, super young, still young, and he was built up in a certain way. He had a sterling record. I called a number of his fights on undercards at Top Rank, and he was less than impressive in those fights. And he was moved into the Santillan fight because Santillan was looking very impressive on those same undercards that I was calling. And then he goes out there and he looks spectacular. I mean, what he did to Santillan that night was beautiful and brutal at the same time. It was an excellent performance. Now, he gets elevated to champion, right? Because I think that was an eliminator. He gets elevated, he gets an email belt.
WBO.
So, we talked about the Ennis situation, but then he gets his defense. Now, there's that old saying, right? Becoming world champion makes you 30% better. I saw that too. I saw him better. Even though he was fighting a nondescript guy, he looked poised, calm, in control, way beyond the 24-year-old, and a way that I haven't really seen. So now I got two performances back-to-back where he looked good. Santillan, obviously much better opponent than this guy was, but still, now maybe those question marks.
He looked good in those fights too. He looked fighting good. He looked good in the Santillan fight too.
No, he looked fantastic in the Santillan fight. He looked very good in this fight. I mean, but Santillan, obviously, much better fighter. So now it's like, is that question mark answered now? Is this guy actually the real deal? Because there was a lot of questions before the Santillan fight. Now it's like, we got a real player here at 47. I don't mind seeing him with Mario Barrios. I mean,
I mind seeing Mario Barrios.
But he's got a belt. He's got a belt, though. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but I don't mind seeing Norman against him, though. I agree.
But I would mind seeing Norman against him because I think Norman probably wins that fight. And then, obviously you got Stanionis and Ennis already tied up. So why not have those two guys fight? Yeah. Then we come together, make them all. Undisputed.
No, it makes a great point. When you talk about the inconsistency of his performances, now you understand he's young. Right? You're sort of coming into your own.
And also needed the opposition.
Yeah, needed the opposition. And that's what that makes my next point, champ. Great athletes aren't always great. They're great when they have to be, right? And Norman, as he steps up the ladder and there's more visibility to him, is understanding the importance of looking good and continuing to get better as a world champion. And he's great. He's getting great when he needs to be.
I have a question for both you gentlemen. It was said about Mike Tyson. Two things I want to ask you guys about. How hard is it to learn on the job as a professional boxer? And what I mean by this is, years ago, I had a trainer tell me Mike fought too much early. And he was fighting like every 2 weeks early on in his career. And I said, what do you mean he's fighting too early? They fought him a lot to keep him off the street. Teddy Atlas said that. When he didn't have a fight coming, he was on the street, and we want to keep him off the street. But they said, if you notice, Mike stopped developing pretty early on because he was fighting so much, he wasn't in the gym getting better. He was always getting ready for a fight. And so Mike, you could argue, peaked at 23 years old. Right? It's not like a guy, oh man, he's young, he's going to consistently get better. Once you turn pro, it's about the fight, not necessarily development. How hard is it to learn while defending your WBO title at 24 years old? People go 24, he's going to be great at 27. Not necessarily. It can be hard to learn on the job. Remember, you're not in the amateurs anymore. What's your thought on that, Chris? That development while being a world champion.
Well, I think it's not so much him developing because he had a very extensive, long development stage of his pro career. Yep. If you look at his record, it was carefully orchestrated to get to where he is. For him now, he's developing his world-class ability, and that can only be done while you're fighting top-notch guys, and we're seeing that. We're seeing the fruits of that labor of his team and his development with his father throughout that beginning part of his career now coming into fruition, like I said, where he's fighting at the world-class level. He's got a title belt. He's fighting better fighters, and he's stepping up. And yeah, there's a learning on the job. There's a learning curve on the job. There always is. I mean, I basically learned how to box as a pro.
Yeah.
My first boxing match ever was my pro debut. I didn't have any amateur fights. Granted, I came from kickboxing, but I learned my boxing while on the job, in the gym and on fight night. So I think that's a little bit of different scenario because he wasn't like he was fighting like Mike was all the time. So I think he was developing through that time, also coming to physical maturity. Because listen, not every 20-year-old's like Mike Tyson.
Not every 12-year-old's like Mike Tyson.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. So I think what they did with Brian Norman Jr. it worked out. It made sense. And even the move with taking the Ennis fight, not taking the Ennis fight. I don't know if that's such a bad idea at this point.
No, he's young. I'll tell you what though, great response, champ. I'm gonna go back to what Jimmy just asked you. What the F are we talking about? The old timers either have to make up their mind that the old way is good or the new way is good. What do we just pick and choose? All of a sudden, it was better back in the day because you fought every 2 weeks and guys were better and all this and they were amazing and boxing was amazing and now all of a sudden you don't learn because
you don't develop because you're too busy.
We joked
So what are you admitting that the old timers weren't as advanced as the modern timers? Because then that's blasphemy to the same guys having that same conversation. So got to make it make sense.
We joked last week. Willie Pep never sparred because he fought so much.
Had no time to spar. Right?
So no, you got to make it make sense. Whichever argument you make, you got to make it make sense. I'll tell you how I make sense of it.
Please.
No two people are the same. For some people that may apply what you said, and then for some other people it may not apply. I think it comes down to the individual, the temperament, the mentality, the ability to learn, the mindset. I also think Tyson stopped developing because he came into so much money and started to enjoy the high life.
At 20.
And marrying celebrity, literally was married to Robin Given. Little high life in different ways, right? Had a smoking hot celebrity wife. It was always in the tabloids.
Who was a nightmare.
And who was a nightmare. And everything else. So I mean, those things kind of have an influence on your learning curve. Not you fighting every 2 weeks.
In science, we call those.
I think those are more of a problem with your learning curve than fighting every 2 weeks.
In science, we call those confounding variables.
Yes. So exactly. So I think the way I make it make sense to just to reiterate again is I think that may apply sometimes and sometimes it may not. I think it depends on the individual, and no two people are exactly alike.
Yeah, dude. Well, when it comes to the deep side of boxing, we're always going to be here about the boxing news here on Boxing Scene Today. The champs, Chris Algieri, along with Paulie Malignaggi. I'm Jimmy Smith. Tune in, find out why millions are watching.